You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's bright, and it's not bright. It's just early again. I keep telling myself it's bright and early. It is early in the morning, and I'm trying to get myself woke up here and get ready for the day's events. Get my hat on straight here. There we go. But if you got a car question, call us at 850-763-0555. Every Monday through Friday from 6 to 6:30. We come on right after Panhandle Outdoors, and we talk a little bit about, we talk about cars. We talk sometimes about politics. We talk about what local politics, national politics, state politics, whatever concerns you. Just pick up the phone, dial 850-763-0555, and we'll talk about it. I know that everybody got back from vacation holidays, but we still travel a lot. I mean, think about this. When I was a kid, if you had a car that had 75,000 miles on it, the car was wore out. We didn't drive as much as we do now, and cars didn't last as long as they do now. And when I say back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, if a car had 75, 80,000 miles on it, it smoked, it used oil, and it was ready to go to the salvage yard. Today, if I see a car with 150,000 miles on it, I don't think twice about it being wore out. As a matter of fact, I don't even think about it being wore out. I think about maybe maintenance that needs to be done to it to bring it back up to snuff, but I don't think about it being ready to be thrown away to the salvage yard. Now, I've seen some cars at 150,000 miles that belong in the salvage yard. No one has done the proper maintenance to them, so by the time they get that many miles on it, they do need to be there. But there's a lot of cars out there with 150,000 miles on it. There's really nothing wrong with them other than the people have decided to get rid of them because, well, the maintenance is due. The transmission fluid needs to be changed, the differential fluids need to be changed. Transfer case, radiator probably needs to be changed too, because once you get 100,000 miles on it or about 10 years, that radiator becomes marginal. It doesn't work like it's supposed to. And remember, the heart and soul of your cars, of the air conditioning system, of the transmission system, of the engine, is getting rid of heat. If you can't get rid of heat, you're going to burn up your engine, you can burn up your transmission, you can burn up your air conditioner. All those things get rather expensive, and that's usually what ends up happening when someone does have a radiator that's faulty, or they don't know it's faulty. The first symptom they have is maybe an air conditioning compressor fails on them, and they go, oh well, it's part of life. I've got 100,000 miles on it. Time to change it. Well, what caused it to do it? What was the high side readings once you got everything put back together? Were the high side readings like they're supposed to be, or were they higher than they should have been? In a lot of cases, we see where the high side pressure is a lot higher than it's supposed to be because of the fact that, well, we're not getting enough heat. We're not getting rid of enough heat doing a heat exchange in the condenser, which is right in front of the radiator, because maybe the radiator is not getting rid of heat properly. Maybe the radiator or condenser is slightly clogged from dirt and leaves and bugs and whatever it may be over the years. So that's why it's very, very important to make sure that you treat not just the symptoms, but the cause of a problem. If your radiator goes out and your car is running a little hotter, that's maintenance. That's something you're supposed to do. You're supposed to change your antifreeze every 2 years, every 30,000 miles. Radiators last about 10 years or 100,000 miles before they need to be replaced, depending on your driving habits.
People aren't used to this kind of maintenance because, like you say, when we were growing up, if a car went 100,000 miles, it was amazing.
It was.
Well, now the lifespan of a car can go 200, 300 if the maintenance is done, and radiator is a maintenance issue. We got to train people to think that way.
Yes, I've got cars out there running with 300,000 plus miles on them that are on their third radiator, and they're on the same original transmission. They're on the original everything except the radiator. We've changed the radiator about every 100,000 miles, give or take a few miles. They end up getting a new radiator on it. And the first time I did it, they were kind of shocked, like going, okay, all right, you say it needs to be changed at 100,000 miles. Well, when the second 100,000 miles came around, there was no hesitation. When we saw that we knew when we put that radiator in at 100,000 miles, we were getting rid of 45 degrees of heat. And over the next 10 years, approximately, or 100,000 miles on this vehicle, we watched the temperature become less and less, getting rid of less and less heat over the years. When it first came in, 45 degrees of heat. Temperature differential between the top hose and the bottom hose. As time went on, it got less and less and less. When it got down to about the 10th year, we were getting rid of about 25 to 28 degrees of heat between the top hose and the bottom hose. We told the customer, we warned you about a year ago it was getting close. Well, now it's time. Let's change the radiator. So at 200,000 miles, we put another radiator on there, checked it again. And also we changed the hoses, of course, on this car. We changed the hoses. Upper, lower hoses, bypass hose, heater hoses, all those get changed because you're only as strong as your weakest link. That's if you got a hose that's bad and it goes out, you're not going anywhere. Something's going to give. So we changed the hoses because remember, the manufacturer out there will tell you your hoses are only good if you call or talk to Goodyear or any of these Gates or any of them, they'll tell you 4 years, 40,000 miles. But you cannot tell a customer 4 years, 40,000 miles change your hoses because I don't ever see anything wrong with 4 years or 40,000 miles of hoses. But I do at 10 years. At 10 years, I see cracking. I see
wicking. A lot of that's something you really have to look very close for. And you do. Customers complain of losing coolant, and it's like. Everything's okay, so it must be wicking through the hoses. When you start taking things apart, then you see it.
If you think you got wicking, one way to find out is to find out how much concentration of antifreeze you've got. If you had a 50-50 concentration of antifreeze and everything seems fine, and then you check it 2 or 3 years later, and now you got a 60-40 concentration of antifreeze, and you didn't add any antifreeze to it, how did it get stronger? That's because the water has wicked out through the hoses.
And leaves the particles of the antifreeze
left in there. So you get a higher concentration of antifreeze, and that's what ends up happening. A lot of people don't realize that happens. That's why hoses after 10 years need to be replaced along with radiators. Heater cores need to be, that's something that a lot of people, especially when it's cold, they don't think much about their heater cores going bad. Until A, they see steam on their dash and they smell antifreeze, that's one. Or B, they go to turn the heater on and they'd only get some lukewarmth out of the car.
So a heater core is just like a miniature radiator.
It is exactly what it is. It's a heat exchange. Matter of fact, if your car is running hot and you're like a mile or two from the exit or whatever, and you want to get a little bit more mild, flip the heater on real quick, and that little heater core will actually act like a little radiator and help cool down the car. I'm not recommending, if you see the car in a hot and red, turn the car off. But if you see the temperature starting to go up and you think it's not in the danger zone yet, turn your heater on and that'll help cool the car off. It really will. A lot of people don't realize it, but that's all it is. It's just a miniature heater.
Now the gauge doesn't really give you a very accurate indication of the temperature. Oh, it depends on the car?
It depends on the car. Yeah, some cars have what we call faux gauges, FAUX. They just either the engine is either off or on. The gauge is right
on the
there in
temperature
middle.
gauge.
Yeah, on the temperature gauge, either it's cold or it's hot or it's at operating temperature. They don't have any in between. It's 1, 2, or 3. It's either cold, operating temperature, or hot.
Now, what kind of cars have that kind of system?
Ford operates that.
Yeah.
Ford operates same way on oil pressure. It's either no oil pressure, too much oil pressure, or just the right amount of oil pressure, whether it's 5 or 10 pounds either direction.
Because on my car, I can watch the temperature, the gauge, the needle come up.
Yes, you can. Not all cars are that way though, but most cars are. When they get into the hot zone, I'm going to tell people when they get over in the red zone, don't drive the car, shut the car off. That's the best thing to do. A lot of people don't realize that, I can drive it to the next exit. Well, that extra mile or two you drive may be the difference between, a $500 bill or a $15,000 bill, depending on how hot you get the vehicle. Some cars you end up having to throw the engine away.
And that's what you're talking about, $15,000.
Yeah, when it gets that on some of these cars, it's just not worth the trouble to tear into them and try to repair them, because you can go out and replace the car with a better car from what it's going to cost to actually fix the engine that you've destroyed.
And that's what people need to understand. Just because a car is 10 years old doesn't mean it's ready to go away. No. But if you do these special maintenance issues, we're not going to call them annual or semi-annual. These are every decade. You'll find out that the car you have will last a lot longer than you expected.
Well, we're talking about radiators every decade, but we're also talking about, every 2 years, change your antifreeze. If people would change their antifreeze every 2 years, and people go, change your antifreeze for 2 years, what do you mean, just drain and fill? No, you have a machine hooked up where you're doing an exchange, not a flush, but an exchange. Your old antifreeze goes into a machine, and the new antifreeze machine goes into your car. It exchanges it at the same rate it takes it out. If they'll do that every 2 years, and they'll make sure the cooling system is working like it's supposed to and got a good radiator cap on it, it's not leaking, there's no reason cars can't get 300,000 and 400,000 miles out of an engine or transmission before things go bad. But fluids do need to be changed in transmissions. Fluids do need to be changed in differentials. I hear Buddy in the background. That's our wonder dog back there, our newest puppy. But yeah, he's back there whining. But you've got to make sure that these fluids they get changed. They don't last forever. A lot of people don't realize that oil only has a shelf life of 2 years, sitting on the shelf not being used. Unsealed. If you sit it on a shelf for 2 years, after 2 years, it really doesn't need to be put in a car because the fluids will, what engineering term called flocculate or stratify, whatever you want to call it. But that's what happens. The additives drop out of suspension and they won't go back into suspension. You can shake it up all you want, it's not going to go back in. The only way it can go back in is if it was processed, cracked at the refinery how they make them. You can't just put it in a car and the engine's going to mix it back up again. It doesn't work that way. 2 years is the shelf life on oil. 2 years is the shelf life on antifreeze. I'm serious. If you talk to people who make antifreeze, make oil, they'll tell you if it's been sitting on a shelf for 2 years, don't use it. Do not put it in the vehicle.
What about brake fluid?
Brake fluid, I can't tell you that. I know that.
Well, don't you remember brake fluid used to come in metal containers?
They don't come in metal anymore.
And now they come in plastic containers. And plastic is permeable.
Well, only thing I can tell you is this.
It's very minutely permeable. It's always able to exchange molecules in and out.
The only thing I know is this. I know is that you check the brake fluid boiling point. You want the brake fluid boiling point 350 degrees or better. And if the fluid is clean, that's great. And if it's 350 degrees or better, that's fine. But a lot of times we see brake fluid that's not clear, it's dark colored, and it'll have a boiling point of 400 degrees. And my guys say, well, that looks good. And I say, well, why don't you see how much copper is in the brake fluid? Because you've got a nice green colored brake fluid there. And I go, yeah, it is kind of green color.
Where does the copper come from?
It comes from the brake lines. It comes from the brake fluid reacting with the nickel copper lines in there and leaching the copper out.
I'm betting moisture has something to do with it.
Moisture is the culprit. Moisture is like the acid. It oxidizes and it actually causes that copper to leach out, causing your brake fluid to go from a nice clear color to a nice green color over a period of time. And that's another fluid that's supposed to be changed every 2 years as well. We're up against the clock, Anna Marie. I got right at 12 minutes right here. What'd you tell me? I go 13:26 is what you said? Okay, so we can go a little bit longer here. But yeah, those fluids, if you would change your fluids like brake fluid, antifreeze, transmission fluid, differential fluid, power steering fluid. No one ever changes their power steering fluid till they have problems. We had a customer came in here the other day. Says, my power steering just doesn't feel right. It wants to bind on me and all this. And I'm looking at it going, well, all the parts are there and everything's there. But I looked at the fluid and the fluid was just brown and ugly. I said, well, what the heck? That's it. Let's just change the fluid. Change the fluid. Steering healed itself. Believe it or not, it did. It healed itself just by putting in good fluid in it. And it didn't require a lot of money. It required taking the lower return hose off, putting in fresh fluid, starting the car up and dumping and as the car started up, the old fluid would be dumped into a bucket. We'd put new fluid in at the same time. It took a two-man operation to do, but it works quite well. That's the best way I know how to change fluid on power steering. But if you want to know about changing fluids, I want to know the procedures and how you can do it yourself to save yourself some money, give us a call, 850-763-0555. I got Scott Hobbs calling from Mr. Rooter Plumbing. He'll be on in just a minute. So if you've got a plumbing question, preventive maintenance question, or a question about how you can keep your plumbing or drain fields or whatever you have in your house for years, working like they're supposed to for years and years to come, give us a call at 850-763-0555. Scott Hobbs from Mr. Rooter coming up next. We'll be right back.
James Auto Center, we fix it right.